Moving to Atlanta, Georgia, here are 15 things that people typically don't realize about moving to Atlanta. The first one is that we have tons of rain here all year long. Not only that, we have lots of water, lakes, rivers, creeks everywhere. And while this may sound like a small thing, it's actually a very big thing that many residents of Atlanta have to deal with regularly. To put this into some perspective, the city of Seattle has an average yearly rainfall of something like 30 or 35 inches per year of rain. Here in Metro Atlanta, we have an average yearly rainfall of 55 inches per year. So there is a ton of water here all the time. It's very common to find a home and it maybe be in a flood zone, and this would require extra flood insurance, or maybe it would be difficult to sell. And so you have to regularly be making sure that the home that you're considering buying is not in a flood zone. Again, this is all over Metro Atlanta and something that you really have to think about if you plan on moving here. What's up, y'all? My name is Victor with Atlanta Suburban Living, and we put out videos every week about moving to Atlanta, Georgia. The next thing that people oftentimes don't realize about moving here is how our due diligence period works. This is also called an inspection period. When you're buying a home, you typically have a certain amount of time to do a home inspection here in Metro Atlanta. And the thing that makes it very unique here in Georgia is that our due diligence period allows buyers to terminate a contract during that period for any reason at all. So if you have a home inspection and you're like, oh, wait, this crazy, foundation problem is going on, or maybe you just are like, you know what, I actually don't like the color of this home anymore. It can be any reason at all. And during that due diligence period, you can terminate the contract to buy the home for any reason at all. Now, it's not as long as other states in the country. Our due diligence period or inspection period is usually 3 to 5 days. I know in other states you sometimes have 2 weeks for this inspection period. Not so here in Metro Atlanta. It's a much shorter amount of time. The next one on the list has to do with property taxes. If you're thinking about buying a home in Georgia or any part of Metro Atlanta, feel free to call, text, or email me anytime. Even if you just have a question about what it's like to live here, I'm happy to help. Thank you so much to everybody who has reached out. But when it comes to property taxes, you should know that property taxes are increasing very quickly here in Metro Atlanta. In fact, there are even companies that have popped up that will help people dispute their property taxes. It's really become an issue here, and lots of people are like, hey, these taxes are increasing very quickly. And so there are a lot of companies. If you're interested in some of these companies, let me know in one of the comments and I can send you the information, but they will dispute your property taxes for you. And then you kind of get a rebate on the amount of savings that you get, and the company gets a small percentage of it as well. Also, you need to keep in mind with property taxes that when you see a home like on Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever, and you see that this $500,000 home has property taxes of like $3,000, that is not normal, and that is not the case for everyone. It may be that that person has some kind of discount, which they often do here. So they give discounts for senior citizens or discounts for veterans, all kinds of reasons why that homeowner might have a discount on their property taxes. It is safer to assume that you're going to be paying about 1% of the home value in property taxes. This next one has to do with construction codes. Here in Georgia, the construction building codes are less restrictive than in other parts of the country. So very often people are surprised to see that we don't build the exterior walls of homes with concrete. They're just built with 2x4s. And when you see like one of these homes being built, and we often like drive by a new construction neighborhood and it's a whole bunch of houses and it's just a bunch of 2x4s, it's really surprising that there just isn't the same construction codes here in Georgia as in other states. Another one is like basements. There really isn't a whole lot of difference in the building codes when it comes to basements And so this can kind of cause problems sometimes here in Georgia, especially considering how much water we get. And so certainly something to think about if you are planning on buying a home here in Metro Atlanta. The next one on the list is that prices are going up here in Metro Atlanta. In many other parts of the country, we're kind of seeing a stabilizing of the home prices or a decrease. Not the case here. We still have home prices increasing every month. And so it's not necessarily getting easier. Now, in the wintertime, I would say that home prices kind of take a bit of a decrease, but this spring and summer and fall, this is really when we're seeing home prices increasing the most. The next one on the list has to do with traffic. While we do talk a lot about the terrible traffic that we have here in Metro Atlanta, you should know that the majority of the traffic is on the interstate system. We have these main roads that go throughout the city of Atlanta: Interstate 75, Interstate 85, 285, and I-20. And these are the main interstates where you find the majority of the traffic. So it's not like the traffic is everywhere. If you live in one of the suburbs of Metro Atlanta, you shouldn't be dealing with as much traffic as if you're like in 75, 85 in the middle of Atlanta. The next one on the list of things that people don't realize when they're moving to Atlanta is that people are very friendly here. This is still a culture of like Southern hospitality, and it's very common for people to say thank you and you're welcome and please. Like, it's just not really the kind of place where it's as cold as some of the other major US cities in the country. So it's still very common for people to be very polite, very family friendly areas all around Metro Atlanta. And this is definitely one of the highlights of living in the metro area. Another one that people often don't realize is the homestead exemption. The homestead exemption is something that you can file with the county that you live in, and it is one of the discounts that you can get on your property taxes, and it applies to everybody who is living in the home, and that home is your primary residence. You can get a homestead exemption to get a discount on your property taxes. Just go to the tax assessor's website for the county that you live in, apply for this exemption, and you'll get a discount on your upcoming year's property taxes. Let's talk about another way to save money here. If you're buying a home in Metro Atlanta and the appraisal comes in lower than the purchase price that you're offering, you are not required to pay the purchase price. So let me explain this. So let's say you're buying a home and you offer $500,000 for the home, and then you have an appraisal, and let's say the appraisal comes in at $450,000. This means that the buyer is no longer required to pay $500,000 for the home. This is super important, despite what the seller may make you think, or maybe your real estate agent makes you think that you have to pay that 500. Absolutely incorrect. You're not required to pay that 500 if the appraisal comes in lower than the purchase price you've agreed on. Next on the list is the amount of racial diversity that we have here in Metro Atlanta. Very often people from other parts of the country kind of think of Atlanta as being like all one race or one culture, and this is not really the case anymore. We actually have a lot of different cultures and races represented here in Metro Atlanta. And so this has become a melting pot of cultures in Atlanta and in the suburbs of Atlanta. And so it's great to see that we have all kinds of different cultures represented here. It's certainly a point of priority for me and my family. And so this is something that is surprising to a lot of people when they move here. And it's certainly something that I appreciate about living here in Metro Atlanta. Okay, this is a big one. Very often people, when they're trying to find a home here in Metro Atlanta, they want to find a home that has a pool. And we just don't have very many homes here with pools in the backyard. It is common in other states, especially like Florida. I know it's super common as someone who used to live in Florida. It's something that I certainly miss, but it's not common here. And I think the reason why we don't have many homes with pools in the backyard is because most homes, the overwhelming majority of homes here, are in an HOA that has a pool. So all of the homes are part of the HOA, and you typically like walk to the community pool or you drive drive over to the pool. And it's not like the pool is open to the whole city. It's not a public pool, but it is a neighborhood pool, and it is usually much bigger than like a pool that you would find in someone's backyard. So this is certainly some pros and cons there. I mean, if you absolutely need that backyard pool here in Metro Atlanta, it's doable. You can find it, but it's just not very common. So to only be willing to purchase a home with a pool in the backyard, you'd be limiting yourself to a very few amount of homes. The next one on the list of things that people don't realize about moving here is that the regulations from like the city and the county and the state just tend to be less here in Georgia than in other states. It kind of goes along with that whole construction building codes thing, but it doesn't just apply to building codes. It applies to like all aspects of life. And while this is kind of vague and maybe hard to explain, I'll do my best. It really just means that the city and the state and the county do their best to let citizens and residents make their own decisions about many different aspects of life. I mean, as a small business owner, this is a big one here. In Metro Atlanta, there are far less regulations on small businesses. Now, this can be good and it can be bad, but it just is something that you need to realize if you're coming from another state where there maybe is a lot of regulations. Like, for example, when you're cutting down a tree in your home, oftentimes you don't need like a city permit or something to like cut down a tree. We have so many trees here. The city and the state don't care if you cut down a tree. Or another one is like when you hire someone to work on your home, it is not legally required that they be licensed to work on your home. Even if you're pulling a building permit from the city or the county, the person who works on your home is not legally required to be licensed. Now, this can be good or it can be bad. It's just that the city and the county is wanting the residents to be able to make their own decisions about those things. So pros and cons there, but certainly something that you should be aware of. Okay, number 2 on the list, and then we're going to get to the number 1 item. But number 2 is that septic tanks here in Georgia are very easy to deal with, very easy to live with. If you don't buy a home, or if you like say, I only want to buy a home that does not have a septic tank, you're going to be limiting yourself to very few amount of homes. Many homes here in Georgia have septic tanks, and this is not something that you should like shy away from. I've owned many homes with septic tanks, and I've never had to like do anything. I've never had to maintain it. You know, it is something that you have to maintain every 10 to 20 years, but it's not something that you have to maintain every 3 to 5 years. And you don't have to like do anything. You just call a company and they come out and they do whatever septic tank maintenance things that they do. It's very hands off. It's not something that you should shy away from, because we have so many homes here with septic tanks. And then the number 1 thing that people don't realize when it comes to moving to Georgia is that the city of Atlanta is in the middle of Metro Atlanta and the suburbs are around the city of Atlanta. But the thing is that there's 100 city suburbs, not exactly 100, somewhere around about 100 city suburbs all around the city of Atlanta. And so there are so many different options. In fact, I made a video about the top 5 best suburbs of Metro Atlanta. You can check that video out right here. I'll see you in the next one.